Hey everybody, how's it going? So, like I said, we are going to explain why you pay the rates you do on your electric bill. And this is, at least for me as an accountant, a very exciting episode we're going to do here because I'm going to show you little accounting tricks that are used to bump up your rate. And I know you're shocked. You're shocked. You thought everything was pretty straightforward, and there would be no manipulation of things to get more money out of you. I know. I'm breaking the rules. So let's get into this. Let me go ahead and share my screen. If I'm not doing that, go. And let me just make sure I am recording. Yeah, I am. All right, cool. So, for those of you who don't know, I'm Derek Espadas. I am running for the Arizona Corporation Commission, which is the body that controls your rates. And I did want to share with you how they come about that. So, last week we covered, rate. That's the amount you pay. I'm just not feeling like I'm sharing my screen here. I guess I am. All right. I'll double check. Maybe we'll do this over again. So your rate, and it's equal to all this stuff, and we'll get to this portion next week. Right now, I want to focus on this O portion. This portion is so important. So, what you are paying comes from this O, and the O stands for operations. And so just think operations. And I think it's fair to think of it this way. The electric companies are able to charge an amount to cover what they pay to provide you with that electricity. Yeah, makes sense. Let's just say, let's keep the numbers easy. Let's just say they had to pay $1 million to provide the electricity. They should get $1 million back. That does not at all sound, unfair. But think about, and for those of you who run businesses of any kind, we're talking, rent, employees, everything that goes into running a business. Now, here's where it gets special. So again, paying employees is they get to recoup the cost of that. Okay. But they also get to recoup the cost of what the CEO, CFO, and all those lovely people make. Right? So if they want to make more money, it actually paying themselves more money raises your rates. Now, in the special case of Tucson Electric Power, they do not report how much their executives make, which is required by law. They do not do that. Another thing they do not disclose, required by law, is how many shares of the company they own. Because here we go again. If they pay themselves more, and that allows them to charge you more, their shares of the company, because they are making more, go up. So we're in this strange situation that the more they pay themselves, the more they make not only for the company, but their values of the shares. And again, let's repeat this again. Tucson Electric Power does not disclose this information, which they are required to by the Securities and Exchange Commission. And then they write op-eds saying how they're just a poor little company trying to get by at $230 million in profit. But wait, there's more. So most of you who are just living your lives, working a job, you've heard of depreciation and how much like vehicles depreciate as soon as you drive off the lot. And that's true. But for a business, we are able to recapture that loss. So let's say you drive off that lot with and just to keep the numbers easy, $10,000 car. Congratulations for finding $10,000 car. You drive it off the lot, and let's just say it drops to $5,000 in value. It's just lost. As a business, I can buy a car for that same $10,000, drive it off the lot, and every year on my taxes, I can reduce my taxes by the lost value spread over a certain length of time to lower my tax obligation. So I get to use depreciation as a tool. Now, this applies to all kinds of property. This applies to, let's say they build a power plant. They're going to depreciate the value of the power plant to lower their tax obligation. Oh, but it doesn't end there. So have you ever wondered, especially in Arizona, why we don't use solar power? And they give a lot of excuses about why we don't use solar. But think about this. If I can leverage the depreciation value on an item to both charge you more and reduce my tax obligation, wouldn't I want to pick the most expensive option to be able to depreciate that? And that is not solar. Yes, solar costs a lot to set up the solar fields and all that good stuff. But one, you can't depreciate land. Land is not depreciable. But the more expensive item I buy, I can depreciate that value. And since it's more expensive, I can charge you more because of this rate formula. So I get to charge you more and take more off my tax obligation. So I'm paying less taxes. Now, this also applies to something called amortization, which is just depreciation for stuff you can't touch. A contract, potential customers, just these are extra things that they get to depreciate. And again, since it's an expense, it's technically in accounting terms an expense, like as if you were actually paying money to something, but we're not. That drives up what you get to claim on operations. And again, get to charge you more and get to reduce your tax liability at the same time. So that's why that O is is such a driving factor for what you pay on your rates because both there's the normal operations of business, but there are also ways to take advantage of that, giving the executives higher raises and not reporting them, using the depreciation as a mechanism of which to not only raise your rates, but to lower the tax obligation. And let's just see what else they're doing here. So I pulled Tucson Electric, and let's see, they in 2020 had $189 million in depreciation. They also added into their taxes or operations to drive that up, their tax expenditures. So as they pay taxes, they use that to raise your rates. Don't you wish you could do that? Don't you wish that you could show up to work one day and say, hey, I bought a new car today, drove it off the lot, it depreciated, you must now pay me. But that is not something that we are able to do. So I will be back next week to explain more of the formula, but keep this in mind. Keep in mind how they're manipulating this to charge you more. And, if you're okay with that, you're okay with that. And since most of us aren't, let's fight this.